This is the Fixer Punk Podcast. I'm Grayson Peltier. On last week's episode, I discussed the issues that are presented by men's influencers, specifically fitness influencers and Liver King, and the social and political implications of their messages, and also the deceptive advertising and the deceptive practices that these parties tend to use to create an almost cult-like surrounding, and how this is analogous to a lot of how conservative, and frankly not even just conservative, but we're talking about going into far-right, alt-right, fascist movements develop themselves, and the sort of unholy combination of those kinds of ideologies. And what I want to get into today, and I think this is very important for anybody who cares about progressive or leftist activism, or really diversity and inclusion overall, and health and fitness, is the solutions to this issue. Because unfortunately, we have these people that are very conservative and that present misinformation to the public, and specifically vulnerable, downtrodden young men that are not getting the kind of outreach and the kind of support that they need from the institutions that we have established in society, and hence are ideal prey for these types of influencers and unsavory providers who misrepresent their own results, as Liver King did by taking steroids and claiming to have not used steroids, and instead it being the result of his quote-unquote ancestral diet, training program, and eating organ meats and supplements, of course, that he was selling. So when we talk about solutions, it is important to know that there is, in fact, a narrative that more progressive thinkers can have around fitness, and specifically strength training, strength sports, and aesthetic and physique sports, and it is not contradictory with a progressive and inclusive vision. In fact, it works very well with it. We can show young men and even young women who get wrapped up into different types of influencers in the quote-unquote crunchy to alt-right pipeline, which is a whole different subject I need to get more deeply into in a future episode. We can empower them to understand the true origin of their challenges, because oftentimes when somebody's coming to a Liver King or to one of these men's influencers wanting to become a bigger, badder, meaner, tougher man, oftentimes it's not just because they're unhappy with how their physique looks in the mirror. It's because they're unhappy with their overall life situation, whether that be personal relationships, whether that be economic, whether that be from a health perspective, a mental health perspective. Maybe they have mental health concerns, and a lot of these types of, especially these stricter diets that are unsubstantiated by science, will make many health claims as well for physical and mental illnesses. And oftentimes they obscure, as I explained in the last episode, this very individualistic lens of just look at your diet, just get on the all raw meat diet, lift some weights, and suddenly your problems with living paycheck to paycheck are going to be solved. That's not reality. By showing these people who would go on this direction the truth, and empowering them to both solve their personal problems and see results in that way, but also to solve the systemic origins of their challenges, we can create a better result, which benefits both the future of progressive ideas, because the political is personal. If somebody sees that somebody swoops into their life and they change their life and they make it better, they're going to be inclined to believe that person on more than one thing. And this is the kind of change mentally and culturally, the kind of cultural change, the cultural civic advocacy that goes beyond what an election campaign ad can do, because it creates those values and that system of almost morality that goes into decisions at the ballot box. But what needs to happen is that progressives and people with more scientific knowledge, they know that that things like obesity, different health issues, even like overall how much you are able to put into a sport that you're passionate about, like things like bodybuilding, powerlifting, how well you're able to do that is influenced by a variety of factors, some of which are systemic factors, some of which are factors that are not as easily modifiable on the individual level, and things that need to be taken into account so that you're not banging your head against the wall thinking, I'm doing everything right in my life, how come everything's not going right? And instead of blaming yourself, look at the potential issues while also working on yourself and making yourself the best possible person that you can be, so that you can care for others and so that you can feel satisfied and fulfilled. And there are definitely gaps in how mental health, fitness, and physical health, how those work together, and making sure that those connections are made clear and that things aren't presented in an overly simplistic way or presented with pseudoscience the way folks like Liver King do. And I could see a future for progressives and people who just generally care about helping other people through health and fitness in these sports to make a positive impact. But what we have on the conservative side is we have, again, an outsized voice. And I used to work on the conservative side. I worked for Tea Party Youth. I worked for a few other conservative organizations. And conservatives have very, very strong business and media ecosystems. And their engagement in fitness is no exception to that. The biggest voices that you're going to hear in the fitness space, and specifically in this aesthetic and physique space that's a bit neglected, because you'll hear just like in terms of like general like health, wellness, just generally like eating healthy and exercising, but without sort of the physique development aspect. You'll find a decent amount of progressive voices in that space. You'll find a good amount of people that are science-based in that space. Although there is some indication that unfortunately a lot of doctors give patients bad information about weight loss, but that's a whole different topic. Unfortunately, though, when we're talking about this space related to physique development and bodybuilding, which is a sport in and of itself, and it's a sport that a lot of young people are very interested in. In fact, I actually saw a study out of the Aspen Institute Project Play report that said that 1 in 3 high school students are interested in strength training as a sport in the context of their high school. And obviously you hear like the anecdotes of like the kid that really just wanted to lift weights and get jacked and joined the football team in order to learn that stuff. So at the youth end, there's definitely some points of intervention of positive role models and using it in the way we'd use other sports to engender positive traits in members of society. But when it comes to when you're looking for information around bodybuilding and physique development and stuff like that, you're going to wind up with people that are somehow influenced or associated with conservative parties. And one of the biggest examples of that I found was there is a YouTube channel called More Plates, More Dates. I know that the title doesn't sound like it, but this is a page that has a lot of information about the use of different types of performance-enhancing drugs. And all kinds of stuff around biomedical science and more of like a medical, clinical, scientific approach to fitness rather than just simply talking about weightlifting and stuff like that. And the guy who speaks on the channel, his name is Derek. He's business partners with a guy named Mike Cernovich. And Mike Cernovich is a pretty well-known conservative commentator / quote-unquote journalist. And they're business partners in this site. I wonder, obviously I spoke a little bit about Cernovich and the fact that he had some like books called MAGA Mindset and content around fitness and personal improvement. But I wonder what value for a conservative media person having a fitness platform has. And I think that if you look at what I explained earlier about the vulnerable young men who get into this, I think that you can see the value of that. And generally, the ironic thing is, especially on a channel that's more focused toward potentially safer use of performance-enhancing drugs, and obviously, we in that younger population, we definitely don't want to influence people into that. We don't want to influence people into that. But if people are going to do it, progressives have really championed, and leftists have really championed over the years, harm reduction when it comes to other types of drugs, stuff like marijuana, opioids. But in terms of the harm reduction around things like performance-enhancing drugs, I haven't seen as much about that in the progressive space. Now, there is some approval of legalization of it, like on a recent episode of Head in the Office, which is one of my favorite political podcasts out there. They were talking about how they'd support the legalization of steroids and PEDs. But it seems like that's a very, very conservative position, or a space that's really filled with conservatives disproportionately, which is very interesting. But what I do know is that there is sort of an ecosystem issue on the left of accepting this whole idea of physique achievement and transformation. And a lot of that has to come down to the whole body positivity narrative, which has significant value. However, unfortunately, it's gotten taken to a bit too far of an extreme that takes the locus of control away from individuals and what they want to achieve. To me, really, it's unfortunate that there's sort of become, even for those people who maybe privately in their own lives believe in, and let's be clear here, nobody should feel like they're pressured to achieve a specific look or a specific level of fitness other than by their own will and their own volition. And it is very important to promote a positive body image. It is very important to not shame people. It is very important that there is acceptance. And I think that a progressive fitness narrative must include those things. However, it must not only be simply body positivity, health at every size. Those are part of it. And I think that that can help people feel a lot more comfortable, and people who maybe felt really, really downtrodden, and like they'll see somebody like a Liver King, they're like, oh my Lord, I cannot ever get to that place. And of course, unless you're taking steroids, you can't get to that place most likely, because he was using steroids. And it's important for both men and women that there be body positivity. But there must not be fat shaming, but there must also not be fit shaming. And I know that conservatives kind of blow this stuff out of proportion when there's one person on the left who says, oh yeah, you shouldn't work out because that makes you hateful, and because you're working out like that and trying to get shredded, that means that you are fatphobic, and that means that you are an oppressor. Even though those people are in a very vocal, small minority. And what we need to do is just not shy away from it and allow people to become who they want to become. And empower them to do that and not pathologize them. Because we'll even have people saying about eating disorders, like saying the progressive fitness narrative unfortunately gets mischaracterized as being primarily about telling people who are controlling their diet and are eating in a specific way to achieve a specific body composition, telling those people that they have an eating disorder, which doesn't jive with the clinical medical definitions very well. Those are the kinds of things that a doctor has to diagnose. So that in and of itself is another form of pseudoscience, telling people they have eating disorders when they're trying to participate in their chosen sport. when they don't actually have them. Of course, athletes should be screened and checked, but that should be done by a properly qualified medical professional. And what this serves to do, and telling people, well, look, you can't do this because this is oppressive. You wanting to be in the best shape possible is oppressive to other people, and you're wrong or you're bad for what you're doing. That just pushes people to the margins. And one example that I like to come back to is skateboarders in the 1980s to the 1990s. There was one progressive group or semi-left-wing group, I forgot the name of it, that was trying to ban skateboards. And obviously that didn't really work. Skateboarding is an Olympic sport now, for better or for worse. And it was over safety concerns. And that's how we have to look at this as well. We shouldn't be precluding people from participating in what they want to participate in. And in fact, we should be making it clear that you can be involved in these things. You can be as great of an athlete as you want to be and still come and help us with our fight for economic justice, help us fight for racial justice. You don't have to revert to a Paleolithic, pre-civilized, pre-social justice person like these quote-unquote experts on the internet are telling you to be, that you need to become like somebody who was alive 200, 300 years ago. And newsflash, 200, 300 years ago, there was slavery. And you don't have to immerse yourself in that in order to get to where you want to get to. You can join the protest, you can join the organizing, and help those people who are in bad situations and those people who are in situations where maybe they're not able to achieve those things. People who are maybe in communities where there isn't enough access to healthy food. You can champion those people while also making yourself great. And embrace these communities, embrace the communities that have these interests, just like what happened with skateboarders that are now mainstream in the progressive movement. And frankly, a lot of them have gone to conservatives over the years, and I have a lot of opinions on that and what could be done to deal with that situation. And it has to do a lot with individual creative freedom. And if I haven't covered it on a prior episode, I'll cover it on a future episode. But don't be afraid to enter this space. And we have a lot of this expertise here, and we have the opportunity to do better. I think I saw a statistic somewhere that like the majority of scientists are left-leaning or voted for Democrats at least. And when we're talking about stuff like whether we're talking about fitness routines, whether we're talking about improving dietary methods, whether we're talking about improving possibly the use of supplementation or harm reduction efforts for those individuals who choose to engage in performance-enhancing drugs, we have the scientific brain trust here for that. We have, frankly, the brain trust to have almost like a think tank around issues of sports and fitness. And the narrative does not have to be owned by people who believe in pseudo-fascist ideas and people who want to return us to the 1800s in a misguided attempt to quote-unquote reclaim their masculinity and feel like they're strong enough or tough enough. And another very important thing to point out is that there are people who are in downtrodden places in society and in their lives who have these sort of aspirations. And I'm one of them. After I'm done recording this, I'm going to be going to the gym myself. I've been on the Adam Page Full Gear Challenge. Adam Page, again, a great example. If you want to look at somebody who is a progressive athlete who deals with issues related to physique development, former AEW World Champion Adam Page is definitely somebody you want to check out. I have plenty of articles about him on fixerpunk.com. And maybe these folks like Liver King help these people a little bit. But if you're someone who is among the 59% of Americans who have a chronic illness, and you're wanting to get up to the point where you are really, really in that full gear ready shape, not just losing weight, but you're dealing with these mental health struggles as well, and you can't get yourself there, the advice that you're going to get from somebody on the internet who is basing their ideology around this ancestral stuff or around a rudimentary knowledge of a few different areas of supplementation or medication that isn't as comprehensive as someone with full medical training is not going to get you there. But when you look for that expertise, you seldom find it. Like, oftentimes I have autism, I have a few other health issues, and then when I've had a bit of money, I've looked into different coaching programs, things like that, and then oftentimes they don't really know how to deal with someone like myself because I have a few different quirks and issues, and there are flexible approaches. There are ways to do it. We know from case studies of professional athletes that have had serious illnesses and injuries that there are ways to work around things, and you just need more intelligence and more knowledge to be able to design programs that will be flexible enough and work properly. And you can't use this kind of bias to arrive at those kinds of strategies. And if we can create interdisciplinary, if we can promote, and because, of course, conservatives' claim to fame is the ancestral, the traditional stuff, the just become bigger and bigger and stronger because you're like the man of the olden days that is bigger, tougher, and stronger. Meanwhile, I don't think that men in those days really were as aesthetic as they are now because science allows us to do a lot of stuff that we couldn't do back then. Even the pace of agriculture has gotten better, so you can get more nutrients to build better muscles. I'm not sure on that, but I think that might be a consideration there. If we can take things and say and look at a situation in an interdisciplinary way and create sort of a new paradigm around athleticism and around physique development that includes a variety of disciplines. There was somebody on Reddit, on the Getting Shredded subreddit, that asked if they knew of anybody who had a therapist or a mental health expert who works on the mental side of dieting and nutrition and nutrition adherence, because a lot of times the mental stuff can get in the way of you staying on the kind of diet that you have to get on to achieve a peak level of conditioning. And no one was able to find such an expert. So if we drop the mental barriers of saying, well, anything other than an absolute body positive, health at every size, total acceptance, and not allowing for any physique changes beyond what is absolutely necessary for health, if we drop that idea and we allow people with the knowledge and expertise who have interest in these areas, who are interested in this side of sports and fitness, to bring their expertise, we could wind up giving better information and shedding light and bringing more people closer to where they want to be, because we're actually going to be presenting information that's scientific and proper and appropriate. And then also the people who are presenting it will hopefully be a more diverse group of people. And in the way that conservatives build media ecosystems, they can be presented on platforms that are not like super hyper conservative. So you could have like, I told you how I used to listen to talk radio, and they would have like health talk radio shows on Saturday mornings, and then talk radio, and then political talk radio shows like throughout the week, and finance talk radio shows on Saturday and Sunday afternoons, and in the middle of the day on the weekdays. So these types of like personal development, personal growth type stuff does often get packaged alongside political content. And if we package good quality information that does work and that's going to help people along with progressive ideas, and we put them in the same ecosystem, people are naturally going to gravitate through that ecosystem and iterate through that ecosystem. And a lot of people on the left just don't think about it. They think of them as, okay, they're separate silos. They're all just like individual businesses, individual areas of endeavor, whereas conservatives see everything kind of flowing together. And that is not, you're not just doing the eliminating the negative of people devolving into fascism and the alt-right because they think that it makes them more manly and more tough. You're providing them an alternative. And then culturally, you have cultural exemplars who may work alongside the scientific and the expert and the coaching exemplars, who share their lives and share how they're both involved in advocacy, activism, and achieving athletic excellence. And it is going to kind of help break down the sort of wall of, I guess you can call it a traditionalist kayfabe that the right has had around it, that you have to be this traditionalist person to achieve the best results in terms of fitness, and is going to benefit the fitness community, and is also going to benefit progressive ideas and diversity, equity, and inclusion overall. And because you have a large percentage of people who are not going to adhere or want to work with somebody like a Liver King, people who are not going to want to go on a organ meat, raw meat diet, the majority of the people in our population who are repulsed by the idea of eating raw meat, as they should be. I don't want anybody getting food poisoning. You're going to have the businesses that choose to engage in a more inclusive approach and have even experts or have coaches and media personalities and athletes who come from diverse racial, social, cultural, gender, sexual orientation backgrounds are going to see improved business outcomes. So you really are improving the entirety of the fitness community by taking an approach like this. So I might come back and do another follow-up on this. I think I've kind of laid out the ideas pretty well of how this would be done. And given some people who are a lot smarter than I am, people who are actually jacked, people who have actual scientific expertise, and people that are in the fitness industry, some ideas to think about. And I think that from there, we'll have to see. I'm going to keep looking around for exemplars and people who are doing things right, and I'll try to highlight them here. I've highlighted a few of them in my past articles about Adam Page, and we want to see this kind of idea go further, just if only to disrupt the misinformation coming from folks like Liver King and the clear adverse effects of that, even if not for the social inclusion benefits, which I do believe are important, and I do believe will come from this. So I am going to wrap up this episode here. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. I really appreciate you listening to the show. I will hopefully be back next week on Thursday. Thursdays are going to be the regular posting time for these episodes here on the podcast. Please follow at FixerPunk on TikTok and Instagram. Those are really updated. And If I don't speak to you before then, I hope you have a Merry Christmas if you celebrate, a Happy Holiday, and I will see you back before the new year and before I start my fitness journey anew then. Thank you so much again for your time.